The neon sign above Mickey's diner buzzed like a dying insect, spilling pale pink light over cracked pavement and puddles that smelled faintly of gasoline. Inside, the air carried the tang of burnt coffee and rain-soaked wool. Emma Chun sat alone in a booth near the window, nursing a cup that had long since gone cold. It was nearly 2 in the morning. Chicago was asleep, or pretending to be. A freight train howled somewhere in the distance, and the diner trembled as if afraid of waking something larger. Emma stirred her coffee for the third time, watching the spoon trace small circles in the murky liquid. She wasn't really tasting it, just listening to the sound, the faint clink-clink that kept her anchored to the present. The waitress on duty, Dolores, had stopped asking if she wanted pie about 3 weeks ago. Emma had become part of the furniture, the quiet girl in the corner who tipped well and never spoke louder than a whisper. But tonight felt different. The air had a hum to it, an electric undercurrent that prickled the back of her neck. She was reaching for her phone when a flicker of movement caught her eye. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, sat in the farthest booth. Too small for the oversized leather seat, his feet didn't touch the floor. His hands moved fast, sharp, fluid gestures that Emma recognized at once. Sign language, her heart squeezed. He was signing please, help, someone. Over and over, his fingers trembling with desperation. No one was answering. The cook pretended not to see him. Dolores refilled a mug at the counter and glanced away quickly. 2 truckers by the door exchanged a look that was more fear than pity. Emma frowned. The boy was neatly dressed, navy sweater, khaki pants, shoes polished to a shine. His hair was combed, his posture straight. But his eyes, dark and haunted, belonged to someone far older. She pushed her cup aside and stood. Every conversation in the diner faltered as she crossed the tiled floor. The boy's frantic movements slowed when he noticed her. Emma raised her hands. Hi, she signed softly. Can I sit here? The transformation that crossed his face was almost holy. Relief flooded his eyes, followed by a fragile joy that made her chest ache. You know how to talk like me. He signed, small fingers hesitant now. Yes, she smiled. My sister was deaf. I learned for her. He blinked, as if trying to decide whether to believe her. Then, quickly, I'm Luca. Hi, Luca. Are you okay? Where's your family? Before he could answer, the bell over the door gave a shriek and clattered to the floor. The men who entered didn't belong in a diner. 6 of them, dark suits, hard eyes, silent. They spread out like a shadow spilling into every corner of the room. The chatter died completely, and then came the 7th. He moved like the world got out of his way. Broad-shouldered, mid-40s, face of polished steel. His gray eyes swept the room with the calm precision of someone who'd made life and death decisions before breakfast. Emma felt the atmosphere tighten, as though even the fluorescent lights held their breath. The man's gaze found the corner booth. For a split second, something human, relief, fear, something raw, broke through the cold. He crossed the room in measured steps until he stood beside them. Papa. Luca signed in a burst of motion. You found me. Emma's pulse stuttered. Papa. The man knelt beside the boy. You scared me, figlio mio, he murmured, voice a low baritone with an Italian lilt that brushed against steel. Then he looked up at Emma. You. His stare was a scalpel. Who are you, Emma Chun? Her voice sounded small, foreign. Hey, he was trying to talk to someone. I speak sign language. The corner of his mouth twitched, half smile, half threat. Interesting. Behind him, his men sealed the exits. No one moved. Emma's throat tightened. Are you his father? He rose slowly, towering over the booth. Adrian Russo. And yes, he's my son. The name landed like a gunshot. She'd heard it whispered on news broadcasts, attached to half-truths and police speculation. Construction magnate, philanthropist, rumored criminal kingpin. A man people feared without quite knowing why. Luca tugged at his father's sleeve and signed something rapidly. Adrian's gaze softened for the briefest moment, then hardened again when he looked back at Emma. My son trusts no one, he said quietly. But he's holding your hand. Emma looked down. Luca's small fingers were curled around hers, warm and certain. Adrian exhaled once, a sound that was more command than breath. Everyone out. The diners fled. Dolores dropped her coffee pot and bolted through the kitchen door. Within seconds, the place was empty except for Emma, Luca, Adrian, and the 6 men positioned with military precision. Adrian slid into the booth beside his son, his movements fluid, dangerous. Sit. Emma sat. He studied her in silence, gray eyes unblinking. You said you learned sign language for your sister. She was born deaf, Emma said. She died 3 years ago. I promised I'd never forget. Something flickered behind his expression. Pain, recognition, quickly buried. Luca tugged on his father's sleeve and signed, "Tell her thank you. She talked to me like I'm real." Adrian's jaw flexed. "He says you're the first person who's ever treated him like he exists." And Emma swallowed hard. People are idiots. For a heartbeat, Adrian almost smiled. "No, people are afraid." He leaned forward. "Do you know who I am now, Miss Chun?" She did. Everyone in Chicago did. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, though the ice in his voice made her doubt it. "But my son has chosen you. That means your life just changed." Emma tried to stand. Two of his men shifted, subtle but final. I should go home." Adrian's tone never rose. "You'll come with us?" "That's kidnapping." "That's protection." His words were velvet over iron. "Luca needs someone who can speak to him. You've proven you can." Emma's pulse thudded in her ears. "I don't belong in your world." Adrian glanced down at his son, now leaning against him, small hands still clutching Emma's. When he looked back, his expression carried something close to regret. "Maybe not," he said, "but my world just claimed you." He stood, gathering Luca effortlessly into his arms. "Come, Miss Chun. It's time you met the rest of the family." Outside, black SUVs idled at the curb, engines low and patient. As Emma stepped into the cold night under the watchful gaze of armed men, the diner lights flickered once and went dark behind her. The rain had followed them out of the city, a silver curtain sweeping across the black windshield. Inside the SUV, the silence was almost physical. Only the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic clicking of the wipers broke it. Emma sat in the back seat opposite Adrian and Luca, her hands clenched in her lap. Every few seconds she glanced toward the boy, curled against his father's side, eyes half closed but not asleep. Even in the dim light, she could see the way his fingers twitched as if dreaming in sign. When the city lights faded behind them, the roads grew wider, quieter, lined with towering trees that leaned over the asphalt like sentinels. Emma pressed her forehead against the cold window. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Adrian didn't look at her. "Home." The word didn't sound comforting. It sounded like a verdict. After nearly 40 minutes, the car slowed before an enormous wrought iron gate. Two guards stepped from a small booth, rain dripping from the brims of their hats. They barely glanced at Adrian before the gates rolled open, whisper silent. Beyond them, the Russo estate appeared through the mist, an expanse of stone and shadow. The mansion rose from the ground like something carved from an old cathedral, its windows dark and high, its gravel drive gleaming under the rain. When the SUV stopped, Adrian opened the door and stepped out with fluid, purposeful grace. A woman in a severe black uniform waited under the portico, her posture ruler straight despite the wind. "Mr. Russo," she said, bowing her head slightly. "Everything is prepared. Thank you, Mrs. Castellano." Adrian turned toward Emma and extended a hand. "Come." Emma hesitated, then took it. His hand was warm, calloused, a working man's hand, not the polished one she'd expected from a rumored crime lord. The moment they entered the house, the noise of the outside world vanished. The foyer was cathedral quiet, filled with marble, crystal, and the faint scent of polish and rain. Emma's reflection trembled across the glossy floor as she followed him deeper inside. "Mrs. Castellano will show you to your room," Adrian said, shifting Luca higher in his arms. The boy's head rested against his father's shoulder, eyes fluttering shut at last. "We'll talk in the morning." Emma found her voice. "Wait. What am I supposed to do here?" He paused at the bottom of the staircase. "Exactly what you did in the diner," he said. "Talk to him. Listen." His gaze held hers a moment longer. "No one else can." Then he was gone, disappearing up the staircase with his sleeping son. Mrs. Castellano led Emma through long corridors where portraits of grim-faced men watched from gilt frames. The older woman's heels clicked evenly against the marble, never hesitating. "The East Wing," she said briskly. "West Quarters. Breakfast is served at 7. Mr. Russo prefers punctuality." Her tone made it clear that prefers meant demands. When they reached a tall door near the end of the hallway, Mrs. Castellano opened it and gestured inside. The room was larger than Emma's entire apartment, soft blue walls, a canopy bed draped in white linen, a window overlooking manicured gardens drowned in fog. "If you need anything," the housekeeper said, "press the intercom." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "Miss Chun, you seem kind. Be careful with that here." The door shut with a quiet click, leaving Emma alone with the echo of that warning. Sleep didn't come. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the muted thud of footsteps in distant halls. Security, she guessed. The house was too quiet for anything else. When she finally crossed to the window, she saw men in black patrolling the grounds, flashlights sweeping the hedges. The estate wasn't a home, it was a fortress. Her mind replayed the diner again and again. The boy's frantic hands, Adrian's lethal calm, the way everyone else had looked away. Why were they afraid of a child? A soft knock startled her. She opened the door and found Luca standing there barefoot in flannel pajamas, clutching a small stuffed bear. He looked up at her and signed, "Can I come in?" She smiled despite herself and stepped aside. Of course. He perched on the chair by the window, small legs swinging. "I couldn't sleep, it's too quiet," he signed. Emma knelt beside him. "I know that feeling." He hesitated, then his fingers moved again. "Everyone here looks at me like I'm broken. Except Papa. And you." Emma's throat tightened. "You're not broken, Luca. You're just different. And that's not bad." He studied her face carefully, as if testing the truth in her expression. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. A shy, crooked thing that reached his eyes. "Papa says different means dangerous." He signed. "But you don't look scared." "I'm not." Luca's hands hesitated mid-air, then finished the sentence with sudden excitement. "Then you can stay." Emma laughed softly. "Is that your decision to make?" He nodded solemnly. "Papa listens to me." "Does he?" she whispered aloud, but Luca had turned back to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For the next hour they talked with their hands. About small things, safe things. Emma taught him new words: rain, dream, brave. He showed her the secret sign his father used for love, an old Italian gesture different from ASL. When he finally drifted to sleep in the armchair, Emma covered him with the blanket from the bed. She stood for a long time, watching him breathe. Somewhere in the dark house, she felt eyes on her, steady, unseen. In the doorway's shadow stood Adrian, half in light, half in darkness. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, just watched his son sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. When his gaze lifted to Emma's face, something unguarded flickered there, something that looked dangerously like hope. Then he turned away, leaving her alone with the storm. The morning light that crept across the Russo estate looked nothing like the city's. It poured through high arched windows in soft gold, touching the marble floors and the heavy drapes with quiet precision, as if even sunlight respected Adrian Russo's house. Emma woke to the sound of footsteps outside her door. Steady, deliberate, almost military. When she opened it, she found a tray on a side table, coffee, fruit, and a folded note written in sharp, elegant handwriting. "Breakfast is served in the sun room at 7. Luca will be waiting." She read the initials twice before realizing her hands were shaking. The sun room was a glass-walled garden attached to the east wing, full of lemon trees and the soft buzz of bees. Luca sat at a long table, legs swinging beneath him, a small whiteboard propped in front of him. He looked up when she entered, and his face brightened instantly. "Good morning," he signed with wide, enthusiastic movements. "Good morning," she replied, smiling. "Did you sleep?" He nodded, then wrote on the whiteboard in neat block letters, "Papa said you'd teach me again today." "Of course," she said aloud, pulling a chair beside him. "But we'll do it my way." They began with stories. Hand-told fairy tales built out of signs and expression. A knight who lost his sword. A princess who learned to speak with her hands. Luca's laughter filled the room, light and fragile and astonishingly real. Mrs. Castellano passed by twice, pretending to water the plants. Even she couldn't hide her curiosity. No one in this house had ever heard that sound before. After lessons, they walked through the gardens. 2 guards shadowed them at a respectful distance, pretending to admire the roses while their eyes never stopped scanning. "Why are there always men with us?" Luca signed suddenly. Emma hesitated. "To keep you safe." "Safe from what?" She wanted to lie, but his gaze was too sharp. "From people who don't like your father." He thought about that, then asked, "Do they not like me too?" Emma knelt to his level. "No one who matters could dislike you, Luca. But sometimes grown-ups fight over things that don't make sense to children." He considered this, then took her hand. "I'm glad you're here." The simplicity of it cut through all her carefully built walls. "Me too," she whispered. That evening, Adrian joined them for dinner. He didn't speak much, just watched the two of them with a quiet intensity that made Emma nervous. When Luca proudly demonstrated the new signs he'd learned, Adrian's expression softened, and something in his shoulders eased that hadn't before. "You've done in 2 days what specialists couldn't do in years," he said after Luca went upstairs. Emma shook her head. He just needed someone who listened. Adrian studied her across the long dining table. "Listening," he said slowly, "is rarer in my world than loyalty." His phone buzzed before she could answer. He read the message. Jaw tightening. The warmth vanished, replaced by command. "Excuse me." He stood already moving toward the hall. From where she sat, Emma caught only fragments of his low-voiced words like shipment, terreno trouble. The same cold current she'd felt in the diner returned, whispering that this house wasn't merely rich, it was dangerous. Later that night, Emma found herself walking the corridor outside Luca's room. He was asleep, a soft snore barely audible through the cracked door. She turned to go, and froze. A shadow moved at the far end of the hallway, near one of the side windows. Too tall to be one of the maids, too still to be patrolling guards. "Hello," she called quietly. No answer. The shadow slipped out of sight. Before she could decide whether to follow, a hand touched her shoulder. She gasped and spun around. Adrian stood behind her, expression unreadable. The faint scent of gun oil and cologne surrounding him. "What are you doing out here?" he asked softly. "I thought I saw someone by the window." He glanced past her, eyes narrowing. A single gesture brought 2 guards running from the stairwell. "Check the perimeter," he ordered. They disappeared down the hall without a word. Adrian turned back to her, voice lower now. "You stay close to me until I say otherwise." "I didn't mean to." He shook his head. "You did nothing wrong. But there are rumors. Someone testing boundaries." Her pulse quickened. "You mean enemies?" "I mean people who would use a child to hurt me," he said quietly. "And now they know he has someone new he cares about." Emma swallowed. "Then they'll come for me too." For the first time, something like fear flickered behind his eyes. "They won't," he said. "Not while I'm breathing." He started to walk away, then paused, half-turned. "Emma." "Yes. Thank you," for giving him a reason to laugh again. The words, simple as they were, lodged in her chest long after he was gone. Hours later, she couldn't sleep. Rain tapped against the window, soft and steady. Somewhere outside, a car engine rumbled, then faded. Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Luca's smile, Adrian's voice, and the way the world outside the gates seemed to be inching closer. She didn't yet know it, but tonight was the last night the Russo estate would ever be truly quiet. Dawn crept into the Russo estate like a stranger who wasn't sure she was welcome. The fog still clung to the gardens, turning the statues into pale sentinels. Emma stood by the tall window of her room, clutching her coffee, and watched the guards trade quiet words at the gate. There were more of them today. 4, maybe 5 new faces. Downstairs, the rhythm of the house had changed. Voices that used to murmur now whispered. Radios crackled in Italian codes that stopped the moment she entered a hallway. Even Mrs. Castellano, who usually moved like clockwork, hurried past her with a tight expression and no morning greeting. When Emma reached the classroom off the library, Luca was already waiting. He'd drawn a crooked sun on the whiteboard. "Everyone's scared today," he signed. She forced a smile. "Maybe they're just busy. Busy looks different," he signed back, eyes narrowing with the uncanny perception only children carry. "Are we in trouble?" Emma knelt beside him. "You're safe. That's all you need to think about." He accepted the half-truth with a small nod, but his eyes flicked toward the window more often than usual. Breakfast in the sun, room was quieter than the clink of silverware. Adrian sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled halfway up, reading a phone covered in fingerprints. His coffee went cold beside him. Luca tried to get his attention by signing the new word Emma had taught him. Hope. But Adrian only nodded absently before returning to the screen. The soft glow of the device painted the sharp lines of his face, the way worry hardened him into stone. Emma cleared her throat. "Did something happen?" He looked up, expression already arranged into composure. "Business. You've added twice as many guards. That doesn't look like business, it looks like preparation." A pause. Then, "Preparation is business in my world." The answer shut the conversation down without slamming the door. Still, she caught the faint tremor of his hand when he set the phone aside. Luca watched him the way children study storms, trying to decide which way the wind would blow. When breakfast ended, Adrian brushed a hand through his son's hair. "Finish your lessons, Piccolo." To Emma he added, If anyone you don't know speaks to you, call Marco. Immediately. He left before she could ask why. That afternoon, the library smelled of lemon polish and rain. Emma and Luca sat on the carpet surrounded by flashcards. He was practicing emotions, excited, angry, tired, when a soft rustle came from the door. An envelope slid beneath it, cream paper, no seal. She frowned, picked it up, and flipped it open. A single typed line stared back, "Your kindness makes you visible. Leave before he cannot protect you." Her breath hitched. No signature, no symbol, just that. She folded the letter quickly and slipped it into her pocket. Luca had noticed. "What is it?" he signed. "A mistake," she replied, forcing her hands steady. "Nothing important." But she couldn't focus after that. Every creak in the hall sounded like footsteps, every shadow felt like eyes. By the time their lesson ended, she'd decided someone inside the house wanted her gone. The corridors smelled faintly of wax and anxiety. When Emma spotted Mrs. Castellano arranging flowers in the foyer, she slipped the envelope from her pocket and held it out. "Someone slid this under the library door." The housekeeper's fingers froze on the stems. Her eyes flicked to the security camera above the doorframe, then back to Emma. "Not here," she whispered, and led her into a narrow linen room that smelled of lavender and starch. With the door closed, Mrs. Castellano read the note once. Color drained from her face. "Dio mio," she murmured. "You should have given this to Mr. Russo immediately. I didn't want to cause trouble for nothing." The older woman shook her head sharply. "There is no nothing in this house. Every whisper means something." She hesitated, then sighed. "Someone inside has been feeding information to the Torinos. The guards change every few months, loyalty is expensive. This note, this is how they test the walls." Emma's pulse hammered. "You think they're inside?" "I think," Mrs. Castellano said quietly, "that Mr. Russo's enemies have decided to reach him through you." "Through the boy." The words landed like cold water. Before Emma could ask more, a male voice echoed down the hall. "Miss Chun, Mr. Russo would like to see you in his study." Mrs. Castellano's mouth tightened. "Be honest with him, but careful. He does not forgive easily, even worry." Adrian's study felt different from the rest of the mansion. Warmer, but only because of the fire eating its way through the hearth. Maps covered one wall. Red pins marking locations that looked suspiciously like shipping routes. Two men stood near the door, their eyes flat and watchful. Adrian gestured them out the moment Emma entered. The door clicked behind her, leaving only the crackle of flames. "You received something?" "Not a question." Emma set the envelope on his desk. "I thought it was a prank at first." He unfolded the paper, read it once, then dropped it into the fire. The edges curled and blackened before she could blink. "Do you know who sent it?" she asked. "Torino." He said the name like it tasted of rust. "He's been moving weapons through my docks. And now he wants leverage. He won't get my son, so he looks for the next weakness." His gaze lifted to hers. "You." The single word felt heavy enough to bruise. "I didn't ask to be part of this." "No," he agreed softly. "But you walked into that diner, and my son smiled for the first time in months. That choice made you part of it." He leaned back, rubbing a thumb along his jaw. "The note means he's watching. He wants you afraid." "Then maybe I should be," she said. Adrian's gray eyes met hers, unwavering. "Be cautious, Emma. Not afraid." For a moment she saw something raw behind his calm, regret, maybe, or guilt. It vanished as quickly as it came. "Go to the East Terrace tonight. It's the safest part of the house. I'll have Marco nearby." "And you?" "I have work to finish before dark." His voice softened. "Thank you for showing me the note yourself. Most people here wouldn't have." By late evening, the estate felt like a coiled spring. Security lights glared across the lawn, distant voices traded orders through radios. Emma found Adrian in the corridor outside Luca's room, jacket over one shoulder, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her, he ended the call immediately. "I thought you'd be resting," he said. "I can't rest when I don't know what's happening." "You know enough." "That's not the same thing." His jaw tightened, and for a heartbeat they simply stared at each other. The cautious civilian and the man who lived inside storms. "You should take Luca and go somewhere safe," she said quietly. "Until this is over." He laughed once. Without humor. "Safe doesn't exist for us. You'd learn that if you stayed long enough. Then let me leave. If I'm a target, I'm endangering him." Adrian stepped closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You think walking out the gate would make you less visible? They'd follow you, Emma. And I'd be wondering every night if you were still alive. The anger in his voice wasn't directed at her. It was aimed at the world that made the choice necessary. You can't control everything, she whispered. His expression softened just a fraction. I know. But I can try to protect what matters. For one fragile second, the air between them carried more than fear, something unspoken, magnetic. Then a distant door slammed, and he stepped back, the moment gone. Later, when the mansion had settled into uneasy silence, Emma found Luca in the kitchen, barefoot and dusted with flour. He was trying to roll cookie dough with a wine bottle. You're supposed to be in bed, she signed, smiling despite herself. Couldn't sleep, thought maybe cookies help. She laughed softly and joined him, tying one of the oversized aprons around her waist. Together they shaped uneven circles on the tray. Luca concentrated hard, tongue caught between his teeth, the way children do when the world finally feels safe enough for small mistakes. Halfway through, he looked up. Papa looks scared. Emma hesitated, then answered honestly. Sometimes brave people are scared too. It means they have something to lose. He thought about that, then leaned forward and hugged her. His small arms were warm and certain. Then we're all brave, he signed against her shoulder. The words stayed with her long after he went back to bed. She washed the dishes alone, listening to the faint hum of generators outside and the distant thunder that might have been weather. Or something else entirely. When the first low boom echoed over the hills an hour later, Emma set the last plate down and realized it wasn't thunder at all. The first explosion sounded like thunder trapped under the earth. The crystal in the chandeliers swayed, chiming a soft warning before silence swallowed the hall again. Emma froze in the kitchen doorway, a wooden spoon still in her hand. Another rumble followed, closer this time, making the windows rattle in their frames. The power blinked once, twice, then died, plunging the house into darkness. Papa. Luca's small voice echoed from the stairs. Stay where you are, she called, already running. When she reached him, Adrian was there first, black pistol in hand, his shirt half buttoned as if he'd come straight from his office. The emergency lights flicked on, bathing them all in the red glow of an alarm. Get him to the safe room, he ordered, his voice a calm blade cutting through the noise. Adrian, what's happening? Torino. He glanced toward the windows where distant flashes lit the night sky. He finally made his move. 2 guards thundered down the hall behind him. South fence breached. One shouted. They've got heavy trucks. Adrian turned to Emma, eyes steel hard. Do not stop, no matter what you hear. Marco will meet you in the west wing. She grabbed Luca's hand. His fingers trembled but his steps matched hers as they sprinted through the maze of corridors. The air smelled of gunpowder and ozone. Somewhere above, glass shattered. A portrait crashed from the wall, its frame splintering on the marble. A third explosion rocked the floor, pitching them forward. Emma shielded Luca with her body as ceiling plaster rained down. He was signing frantically. What's happening? Are we going to die? But her hands were shaking too badly to answer. They reached the grand library. Marco waited there, blood streaking his temple. This way, he barked, pulling aside a shelf of leather, bound books to reveal a steel door. Emma pushed Luca inside. The corridor beyond was narrow and cold, lined with reinforced concrete. Mrs. Castellano stood by a control panel, face as pale as paper. Where is Mr. Russo? She demanded. Outside, Marco said, slamming the wheel that sealed the door. And God help anyone in his way. The heavy lock clanked home. The noises from above grew distant, muffled by layers of stone. Still, Emma could feel the vibrations through her knees as she knelt beside Luca. It's just noise, she whispered, signing each word slowly so he could see. We're safe. Papa's coming back. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and pressed his small hand against hers. Promise. I promise, she said, and hoped the trembling of her fingers didn't give her away. The heavy door sealed with a final metallic cough, and the sound that followed was the heartbeat of the house itself. Deep, rhythmic thuds that rolled through the floor. The emergency lamps cast a weak amber glow across concrete walls lined with supplies. It smelled faintly of oil and old air. Emma sat cross-legged on the cold floor, Luca pressed against her side. He trembled each time another explosion rippled above them. She could feel his heartbeat, quick and fragile, through the fabric of his shirt. It's okay, she whispered, shaping the words with her hands so he could read them. It's only noise. The walls are strong. He looked up, wide-eyed. Papa is out there. I know. Her throat tightened. He'll come back. Across the room, one guard was muttering into his radio. Static on all channels. They're jamming the signal. Mrs. Castellano stood by the vent, staring at the thin gray smoke curling from it. The air system stopped, she said. That's not good. The guard cursed softly and hit the fan switch. Nothing. Emma pulled Luca's face against her shoulder. Breathe slow, she told him. Through your nose. She tried not to show her own panic, the taste of metal in the air, the realization that the oxygen in the sealed room was finite. A deeper boom shook the ground, louder than any before. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The overhead bulb flickered once and went out. Only the red light from the emergency exit sign remained, painting everyone in a ghostly hue. Backup power's gone, the second guard said. That was too close. Mrs. Castellano whispered a prayer in Italian. If they breach the west wall, this room won't hold. Emma rose, gripping Luca's hand. There's an escape tunnel, isn't there? The guards exchanged a look but didn't answer. One finally said, We're ordered to stay put until Mr. Russo gives word. Well, he can't if the radios are dead. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. He told me to keep his son safe. I'm doing that. The older guard hesitated, then yanked a metal panel open near the floor, revealing a dark opening just large enough for a child and one adult to crawl through. It leads to the laundry corridor. No promises after that. Emma crouched. Come on, Luca. He shook his head violently. We can't leave them. We'll come back, she signed. But we need air first? Another tremor rocked the room, deciding for them. She pulled him into the tunnel, the scent of smoke following close behind. Behind her, Mrs. Castellano whispered, Dio ti protegga, and the panel slammed shut. In the dark crawlspace, Emma crawled on hands and knees, one arm around Luca. Above them, the war of the world raged on, but somewhere beyond the smoke and fire, she knew Adrian was fighting his way toward them. Gunfire cracked like snapping branches in the marble hall. Adrian moved through the smoke, body low, each step deliberate. His suit jacket hung in tatters, one sleeve dark with blood that wasn't his. North corridor clear, Marco's voice echoed. Hold that line, Adrian ordered. Keep them out of the west wing. The estate that had once been silent elegance was now a battlefield of overturned furniture and shattered glass. A crystal chandelier lay on the floor like the bones of a fallen star. He checked the magazine, reloaded, and pressed his back to the wall. Through the haze he saw 3 of Torino's men advancing, black masks, heavy rifles. He fired twice. 2 went down, the third ran. Silence returned, thick and vibrating. Adrian's radio hissed. They knew the codes, boss. The gates opened from inside. A traitor. Of course. He ground his teeth. Shill the eastern perimeter manually. Burn the cars if you have to, Static answered. Then another sound, a faint, metallic rhythm beneath the floor. Tap tap, pause tap. Again, he froze. Emma, he muttered. The emergency crawl vents ran under this corridor. She was moving, alive. For the first time that night, a breath escaped him that wasn't a command. He shouted to Marco. They're under us! Laundry corridor! Get the west stair open. He sprinted down the hall, boots slipping on wet tile, following the sound of distant coughing and a child's cry. The heat built around him, flames lipped up the draperies, painting his world orange. He smashed through the final door with his shoulder. The laundry corridor roared with smoke and sprinklers. Out of the haze came Emma. Hair plastered to her face, Luca clutched to her chest. For a second everything else fell away. Adrian, she gasped. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, wrapping an arm around both of them, dragging them toward the exit. You shouldn't have left the safe room. You're welcome, she rasped, and he almost laughed. Let's get out before the roof decides to join us. They ran together through the firelight toward the garage doors, and the dim promise of escape. The garage was a tunnel of smoke and echoing orders. Engines roared, tires spun on marble. Adrian shoved the last crate aside and waved them toward the open SUV. Go now. Emma climbed in first, dragging Luca onto her lap. The boy clung to her shirt, coughing softly. Marco slammed the door and jumped into the passenger seat, while Adrian slid behind the wheel. The moment the transmission caught, they were moving, fishtailing through the haze. The reinforced doors groaned as they opened, letting in the night and the stench of rain-soaked ash. Adrian floored the accelerator. Behind them, the mansion let out a single, thunderous sigh, stone giving way, timbers collapsing in on themselves. Emma twisted to look. Through the rear window she saw the place that had felt like another world disintegrate into firelight. For a heartbeat she couldn't breathe. Adrian's voice cut through the radio static. "Al convoys, report." Only two voices answered. He didn't react, didn't blink, just drove faster. Luca stirred. "Is Papa okay?" he signed weakly. Emma touched his hair. "He's right here." The boy's eyelids fluttered closed again, soot streaking his cheek like war paint. She looked at Adrian. Rain traced cold rivers down his face where the window had cracked open. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Are we safe?" she asked. "Safe enough to keep breathing," he said, eyes fixed on the road. Then, softer, "I should have moved you sooner." She almost told him he couldn't have known, but the words caught in her throat. Outside, dawn was bleeding into the clouds, turning the rain to silver. Miles later, the convoy rolled through iron gates onto a smaller estate overlooking a black mirror of water. The engines cut. Silence fell, heavy and unreal. Adrian stepped out first, scanning the horizon before opening their door. "Welcome to the lake house," he said quietly. "It isn't home. But it will do until I make things right." The convoy rolled to a stop just as the sky began to lighten. Mist drifted off the lake, softening the edges of the world, until everything looked half-remembered. Emma stepped out first, the gravel crunching under her shoes. The air smelled of rain and pine instead of smoke. Behind her, Luca blinked up at the glass and steel house that rose from the shore, sleek, modern. A fortress pretending to be a home. Adrian was already moving, issuing quiet orders to the men who emerged from the other vehicles. His voice carried the same calm authority that had steered them through the night. Only the cut at his temple betrayed how close they had come to losing everything. Emma led Luca toward the porch. "It's beautiful," she said, though the word felt strange on her tongue after fire and sirens. Adrian glanced back. "It's functional," he corrected. "Beauty gets you killed." Inside, the lights flicked on automatically. The rooms were wide and sparse. Concrete floors, black furniture, windows facing endless water. Not a trace of the old world's opulence remained. This was efficiency carved into architecture. A medic appeared, murmuring in Italian. Adrian waved him off. "See to the boy and Miss Chun first." Emma knelt by the sink, washing the soot from Luca's hair. The water ran gray down the drain. Only when her hands began to shake did she realize the tremor wasn't from cold. "You're safe now?" she whispered. Luca nodded, eyes fixed on the rippling water outside. When she straightened, Adrian was watching them from the doorway. Shoulders sagging slightly, exhaustion finally visible. "Thank you," he said, the words quiet, unfamiliar in his mouth. Emma met his gaze. "For what?" "For getting him out. For not waiting to be told." He started to turn away, then paused. "Rest. There's a room upstairs for you both." As his footsteps faded down the hall, Emma lifted Luca into her arms. The boy's breathing evened against her shoulder, the smell of smoke replaced by the faint scent of lake air. Outside, dawn broke over the water, pale, uncertain but real. For the first time in days, she let herself believe they might see another sunrise. The lake house was so quiet that even footsteps sounded out of place. Emma wandered its corridors after settling Luca in a guest room. The walls were pale concrete. Every door had a keypad lock. The place smelled faintly of new paint and metal. A shelter built for function, not comfort. She passed one room filled with sealed crates, and another that looked like a command center. Monitors looping grainy camera feeds of the shoreline. Outside, guards moved as small dots of motion among the pines. The silence pressed in. Every few minutes the security system gave a soft electronic sigh, like the house itself was breathing. When she opened a door near the end of the hall, she found a grand piano under a dust cloth. Luca would love it. She lifted the cover, the keys gleamed, untouched. A single note rang out when she brushed one by accident. Bright, lonely, echoing through the emptiness. Mrs. Castellano appeared in the doorway. "You can play, Signorina, a little. My grandmother taught me. Play for the boy tomorrow. He needs something soft to remember the world isn't all noise." The housekeeper's eyes, red from sleeplessness, softened. Then she whispered, "He built this place after his wife died. Never meant to live in it again. Only to hide others here if needed." Emma looked around at the locks, the cameras, the sealed windows. "It feels like a bunker." "It is," the woman said simply, and left her with the piano's single fading note. Later, when the house had gone still, Emma followed a faint light down the corridor and found Adrian in a bathroom off the master suite. He stood shirtless before the mirror, dabbing antiseptic over a scrape along his ribs. The overhead bulb painted his skin in harsh gold, the muscles along his back moving like coiled rope. "You should let the doctor do that," she said. He looked at her reflection but didn't turn. "I've had worse." She stepped closer, took the gauze from his hand. "Sit." For once, he obeyed. She cleaned the wound carefully, the smell of alcohol sharp in the small room. The silence between them was heavier than the night outside. "Who betrayed you?" she asked finally. "One of my own. I don't know which yet. But he'll show himself. Rats always do. Doesn't it ever get lonely?" she murmured, living like everyone's a possible enemy. His eyes met hers. "Did. Then I hired a woman who taught my son to laugh again." The words hung there, raw and unexpected. She tied the bandage, her fingers brushing his skin, and stepped back before the air between them caught fire. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the bandage. For reminding me I'm still human." Outside, the lake tapped gently at the shore, and somewhere in the dark, hope took its first, fragile breath. The lake house settled into an uneasy quiet after midnight. The hum of generators mixed with the rhythmic lap of waves beyond the glass walls. Upstairs, Emma stood in the doorway of Luca's room and watched him twist beneath the blankets. He was dreaming, his fingers moved in tiny fragments of sign language even while he slept. "Run, smoke, Papa." She knelt beside him and brushed the hair from his forehead. "It's over," she whispered, shaping the words with her hands so he might feel them in his dreams. "You're safe now." He stilled, exhaled, and rolled toward her. She stayed on the edge of the bed until his breathing deepened, then turned toward the window. Beyond the wide pane of glass, a figure stood at the dock. Adrian. Barefoot, sleeves rolled, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. The ember flared each time he drew in, briefly lighting his profile. The set jaw, the quiet grief. She thought about the stories whispered in the city, the ruthless Russo hair, untouchable and cold. The man outside looked nothing like those rumors. He looked tired. Human. For a long while she watched him from the dark, the moonlight silvering the scars on her arms from falling debris. When she finally lay down beside Luca, she couldn't tell which sound reached her first. The boy's even breathing or the faint crack of the dock's boards under Adrian's lonely steps. Morning arrived soft and gray. The storm had passed, leaving the lake smooth as glass. In the kitchen, Emma found a row of groceries already unpacked. Mrs. Castellano's silent kindness. She brewed coffee and set a pan on the stove. The smell of butter filled the air just as Luca padded in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He pointed toward the grand piano visible through the open archway. "Can I?" he signed. "Go ahead." The first hesitant notes drifted through the house. Unsteady at first, then clear, bright. It was the same melody Emma's grandmother had taught her. Luca had memorized it after hearing her hum the tune in the car. When Adrian appeared, he paused at the doorway, one hand still on his phone. The music stopped him. For the first time since the fire, a faint smile tugged at his mouth. Emma asked. He pocketed the phone. "If there's enough for 3. There was. They ate together at the wide counter, the lake glinting beyond the windows. Conversation stayed light, safe. Yet each time their eyes met, the silence between them felt less like distance and more like recognition. Outside, gulls circled over the water, white specks against the morning sky. Inside, the house no longer felt entirely like a fortress. Evening crept back across the lake in slow layers of color. Rose, then amber, then the bruised blue of twilight. The glass walls of the house turned the sunset into fire. Emma stood on the back deck, a mug of cooling tea in her hands. The day had been almost ordinary: lessons with Luca, a walk along the pebbled shore, Adrian on the phone arranging repairs and relocations. Almost, now the quiet felt heavier again. The gulls had gone, replaced by the far-off call of loons. Behind her the lights inside the house glowed warm and domestic, but she knew every door still locked itself automatically at 9 p.m. Adrian joined her without a sound. He carried no phone this time, no jacket, just the stillness that followed him like a shadow. For a while they watched the water side by side. Small waves broke against the dock, scattering gold fragments of light. "He fell asleep fast tonight," he said. Emma nodded. "He played until he could barely keep his eyes open." "That's good." He rested his forearms on the railing. "Music works better than medicine." She glanced at him. "You used to play." "My father did. I was better at listening." A faint smile tugged at his mouth, then faded. "Listening saved me once. Maybe it'll save him." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. "Do you think they'll come again?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Torino doesn't forgive failure. He'll regroup. Next time he won't go for property. He'll go for people. His eyes flicked to her, steady and unflinching. "That's why we train, we plan, we stay alert. So we don't sleep. So we learn how to breathe while awake." He looked out over the lake again. "For now, we breathe. Tomorrow, we prepare." The words were simple, but they settled in her chest like a promise and a warning. Emma set the mug down on the railing. The surface of the lake caught her reflection beside his, two blurred figures in the dusk. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider standing next to a stranger. She felt like someone standing at the edge of whatever came next. Behind them, the lights in the house dimmed automatically, the gentle hum of the security system blending with the sigh of the waves. Tomorrow would bring plans, lessons, maybe danger again. Tonight, they breathed. The lake looked innocent in the morning. Mist lifted from the surface in soft curls, and for a moment Emma could almost pretend it was any ordinary summer day. Downstairs, Luca sat at the kitchen table, sketching waves in his notebook. Each line shimmered with silver crayon. When she bent to kiss his hair, he signed, "The water's quiet today." "That's good, isn't it?" she replied. He considered, then shook his head. "Too quiet means something's hiding." Outside, sharp commands broke the stillness. Adrian's voice, measured firm. Emma carried 2 mugs of coffee to the back porch and found him standing with 5 men by the gravel yard, each holding compact rifles. His presence turned the air into order. He took a mug from her without looking. "We start drills today." "Drills. For emergencies. You and Luca need to know what to do if last night ever repeats." Her instinct was to argue, but the memory of fire and glass silenced her. "He's just a child," she said instead. "He's my child," Adrian answered softly. "And I won't let him die because I wished him older." The words left no room for protest. He turned toward the yard. "Marco will teach signals. You'll learn them too. 5 hand gestures, directions, silence, safe, danger, hide." Emma watched as Marco knelt beside Luca, demonstrating with exaggerated movements. The boy copied him eagerly, laughter bubbling when he got it right. Sunlight touched his face, warm and unguarded. Adrian stood beside her again. "He learns fast, like his mother." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife. Emma glanced at him but said nothing. The lake shimmered gold in the distance, calm and secret. When Luca hit a perfect throw that sent a pebble clinking against a tin can, he looked back, triumphant. Adrian allowed himself a small nod of approval. Emma realized, with a sudden tightness in her chest, that this man's love looked like vigilance. Constant, consuming vigilance. For a few breaths, the world felt almost steady again, until a hawk screamed overhead, and every guard on the property looked up at once, hands instinctively moving to their weapons. The peace shattered, just a little, reminding them all what kind of morning it really was. By noon, the gravel yard behind the lake house looked more like a miniature parade ground. Adrian's men had set up wooden markers, bright orange cones, and a simple obstacle course that wound toward the trees. Emma stood beside Luca, a borrowed cap shading her eyes. The boy's excitement was obvious. This was adventure, not fear. Adrian paced the line of men. "This is a drill, not a battle," he said, voice carrying. "The goal is speed and silence. If the alarm sounds, we move through the escape route in under 3 minutes." He turned to Emma and Luca. "You two will practice with us. We'll do this until it's muscle memory." She folded her arms. "He's 8. And he's already seen more than most soldiers." Adrian replied. "Pretending he hasn't won't help him." There was no anger in his tone, only a quiet conviction that frightened her more than shouting would have. Marco clapped his hands once. "Positions." The first alarm was a single sharp whistle. The guards scattered into motion. Emma grabbed Luca's hand and followed Marco through the course, ducking beneath ropes, crawling under wooden planks, counting her breaths to steady her nerves. When they reached the end, her palms were scraped and her lungs burned, but Luca was grinning. "He signed again!" Adrian's eyes met hers across the yard. For a second his stoic mask broke into a quick, fierce smile. "Good, once more, this time blindfolded." She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But when she saw Luca tying the strip of cloth around his own eyes without hesitation, she swallowed the protest. If he could be brave, so could she. Later, the drills moved to communication. Marco lined up a few metal cups on a table and began teaching the Russo Cruz hand signals. 5 basics, he said, raising a finger for each. Stop, move, safe, danger, hide. Emma copied his gestures carefully. Her background in sign language made it easier, though the blunt efficiency of these motions felt alien. Less about conversation, more about survival. Luca, quick as ever, turned it into a game. Darting around the yard and testing each signal on the guards, who humored him with serious salutes. His laughter bounced against the house, light and startlingly normal. When Marco stepped away to check the perimeter, Emma found Adrian beside her again. He watched his son, arms folded. You don't like this? He said quietly. I don't like what it teaches him to expect. Adrian nodded. I told myself the same thing once. Then someone I loved died because she didn't know when to run. The honesty in his voice silenced her. Wind rippled across the lake, scattering sunlight. She wanted to argue that a child deserved peace, but the world they lived in had already taken that choice. Luca ran up then, signing proudly, danger, hide, and diving behind a barrel. Emma couldn't help laughing. Adrian's expression softened. It's not about war, he said. It's about surviving long enough to see peace. She met his gaze. Then promise me there will be peace someday. I will, he said, eyes steady on hers. But promises are only words. Preparation is what keeps them true. By mid-afternoon the air above the lake shimmered with heat. The drills had ended, the men retreated to clean weapons and radios, leaving the backyard scattered with cones and footprints. Emma sat on the steps of the deck, a bowl of peeled apples beside her. Luca was in the shallows below, trousers rolled to his knees, throwing flat stones that skipped 3 times before sinking. Each throw ended with a delighted grin. From the kitchen window the smell of coffee drifted out. Adrian appeared with 2 mugs and handed her one. His shirt was damp from work, sleeves pushed to his elbows. They sat without talking for a while, the quiet not uncomfortable. He's adapting, Adrian said finally. He's still a child, she answered. He shouldn't have to adapt to fear. Children adapt faster than adults. That's their curse. She looked at him. Do you ever stop seeing threats? He considered the question, then shook his head. If I do, we die. It wasn't bravado, it was fact. The simplicity of it made her chest ache. Inside the house, Luca's laughter echoed as Marco taught him to stack tin cans for target practice. For a fleeting moment, the sound felt like sunlight after a storm, thin, precious, alive. Adrian caught her expression. It's been a long time since this house heard laughter, he said. Then maybe it's healing, she replied. He didn't answer, but when he stood, he left his mug beside hers, half full, still warm, like proof that the day had softened him a little. The call came just before sunset. Emma was teaching Luca a new word in sign courage, when Adrian's encrypted phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen once and stiffened. What is it? She asked. An old contact, he said. Claims to have information on the trader who sold us out. Can you trust him? Trust isn't the currency we use, he replied, already sliding his holster into place. Information is. Outside, the guards moved quickly, checking vehicles and rifles. The calm of the afternoon vanished like breath on glass. Luca tugged at Emma's sleeve, signing, Papa leaving. Just for a while, she answered. We'll stay inside. Adrian crouched to meet his son's eyes. Be good for Emma. I'll be back before you wake. Luca nodded but didn't smile. When Adrian straightened, Emma caught his sleeve. Be careful. He gave a single nod. Always. The convoy pulled away a few minutes later, headlights carving through the trees. Emma stood on the porch until the sound of engines faded into the dusk. The lake was perfectly still again. Too still. Even the gulls had gone silent. Luca came to her side and signed, the water's listening. She looked out at the darkening waves and felt the truth of it in her bones. Somewhere beyond those trees, the world was already moving toward them again. Dusk pressed down like velvet, thick and soundless. The forest behind the lake house was a wall of dark trees, their outlines soft against the fading sky. Emma stood at the wide glass doors long after the convoy's taillights had disappeared up the road. Inside, the house hummed softly, the low, constant breath of machines. Luca had curled up on the couch with a blanket and one of Adrian's oversized sweaters, the sleeves dangling past his hands. He was tracing shapes in the air, silent conversation with dreams that only he understood. Emma dimmed the lights, checked the locks out of habit, and walked back to the window. The water lay perfectly still, reflecting the last orange stripe of sunset. Too still. She tried to tell herself that silence meant safety, but her pulse refused to slow. From somewhere in the woods, a branch snapped. The sound was faint, yet sharp enough to slice through the quiet. She turned toward it, heart leaping. Nothing moved. Only the slow drift of fog from the shore. She stared until her eyes ached, but the forest gave her nothing back. Still, the hairs at the nape of her neck lifted. Years of city life had taught her the difference between solitude and being watched. This was the latter. She backed away from the glass and locked the door bolt, feeling foolish for how loud it sounded. In the corner of the room, the security monitor blinked once, just static, no image, and then steadied again. Emma forced a breath. Paranoia, she told herself. You're jumpy because of what happened. But she found herself checking the hallway camera feed anyway, scanning for movement. Nothing. Satisfied, or pretending to be, she returned to Luca, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Sleep, she whispered. Your father will be back soon. Outside, night claimed the last traces of color from the lake. Crickets began their soft chorus, and the house settled deeper into its mechanical heartbeat. Half a mile away among the trees, a figure watched the lights go out one by one. Through binoculars, the house glowed faintly, warm, alive, unguarded to the untrained eye. The observer lowered the lenses and murmured into a radio, voice low and satisfied. Target located. They think they're safe. A brief hiss of static answered, then silence. The figure melted back into the woods, leaving only footprints that the dawn tide would wash away. The house was too quiet. Emma woke with that thought lodged behind her ribs, the kind of stillness that felt listening. Gray light spilled through the curtains, washing the room in silver. Downstairs, the floorboards gave a soft sigh under her bare feet. She reached the kitchen and froze. The door leading to the deck stood open an inch, the curtain breathing inward with the morning breeze. She could have sworn she'd locked it. Every bolt, every latch, the cool air carried a scent of wet earth and pine. Outside, the lake was glass smooth, reflecting the pale sky. Nothing moved until she saw them. Footprints. Dark smudges of mud trailing from the deck steps to the threshold. Small, narrow, unmistakably human. And barefoot. Her pulse leapt. Marco. She called softly, no answer. She checked the hall monitors, all green, all calm. Whoever had left those prints knew where the cameras didn't reach. She crouched, tracing one mark with her fingertip. The mud was still damp. Behind her came the faint shuffle of feet. She spun, heart in her throat, only to find Luca blinking sleepily at her from the hallway, blanket trailing like a cape. Sorry, she breathed, forcing a smile. Go back to bed. He pointed toward the door, then signed. Who came in? No one, she lied quickly, closing and bolting it. Just wind. Luca frowned, unconvinced, but let her shepherd him upstairs. When he was settled again, she returned to the window and looked out across the water. The tree line on the far shore was beginning to glow with sunrise, each trunk a black slash against fire-colored light. For a moment she thought she saw movement there, a figure slipping between pines, but when she blinked it was gone, replaced by fog. The phone on the counter buzzed, startling her. Adrian's voice came through, rough with static. Will be another 12 hours. You and Luca stay inside. Understood. She looked again at the footprints slowly drying on the deck. Understood, she said, and prayed he couldn't hear the tremor in her voice. When the call ended, she locked the door a second time and drew the curtains shut. Outside, the lake kept its silence, but somewhere beyond that silver water, something had already crossed the line between waiting and approaching. By mid-morning, the lake wore its usual disguise of calm. Emma tried to believe the footprints had been a trick of memory. She baked bread, helped Luca with arithmetic, and opened the windows so the smell of yeast and pine could chase away her unease. Still, she kept glancing toward the tree line. When Luca begged to feed the swans, she agreed, but stayed on the dock with him, shoes off, toes brushing the cold water. He tossed handfuls of grain, laughing when the birds hissed and jostled. The sound loosened something tight inside her. Then the laughter stopped. Luca's hand froze mid-throw. He pointed toward the far edge of the trees. At first she saw nothing. Then, between two trunks, a shape shifted. Dark against the green, too precise to be wind. It lingered just long enough for her stomach to drop, then vanished. She scooped Luca up, heart hammering. Inside. Now Marco met them at the back door, weapons slung over his shoulder. What happened? Someone's out there, she said. I saw them. He went pale but nodded once. Stay here. Minutes later, Guards combed the woods in widening arcs. They returned empty-handed, their radios hissing with static. No prints, no heat signatures. Marco reported. Could have been a deer. But Emma knew deer didn't stand upright or watch with human patience. That night she found mud again. One faint smudge on the porch rail, shaped like a fingertip. Darkness came early. Clouds smothered the moon, turning the lake to liquid iron. The house glowed in warm pockets, hallway, kitchen, Luca's room, while outside everything blurred into shadow. Emma was reading aloud when the lights flickered, once. Twice. Then out, the hum of generators died, replaced by the soft mechanical click of locks disengaging. In the dark, the air felt suddenly thinner. Luca clutched her arm. She groped for the flashlight by the bed and flicked it on, its narrow beam slicing through the gloom. "Remember the drills," she whispered, shaping each word with her free hand. "Silent, wait," he nodded, eyes wide. Below them came a faint sound, the unmistakable creak of a door, one, then another. Whoever was inside moved carefully, confident. Emma guided Luca into the wardrobe's narrow space and closed the door, leaving a crack to breathe through. The footsteps reached the stairs, paused, then continued upward. Her pulse pounded so loudly she feared it would betray them. A minute later the power surged back. Lights flared, alarms screamed, and the footsteps vanished. When Marco and the guards burst in moments later, they found no one. Only a single open window in the hallway and a missing photograph from the wall. Adrian's wife and son. The glass shattered where it had hung. Emma stared at the empty frame, realization chilling her deeper than fear. Whoever had come wasn't just hunting. They'd left a message. The first gray light of dawn leaked over the lake when the low growl of engines reached the house. Emma stood at the window, the empty frame of the stolen photograph still on the wall behind her. She hadn't slept. Every sound in the night had felt like breathing she couldn't locate. The convoy rolled to a stop on the gravel drive. Adrian climbed out before the tires finished crunching, coat unbuttoned, hair damp with rain. He looked at the shattered glass once, then at her. "What happened?" His voice was calm, too calm. She told him the blackout, the footsteps, the missing picture. While she spoke he moved through the room, checking locks, the generator switch, the camera feeds. Each gesture was sharp, efficient, anger pressed into precision. Marco appeared, face gray with fatigue. Perimeter sweep was clean, boss. Whoever it was knew where every blind spot sits. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then they've been here before. He dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand and turned back to Emma. "You followed protocol. You kept him quiet. You did everything right." "That doesn't feel like winning," she said quietly. "It isn't." He set the broken frame on the table. "They weren't after blood this time. They wanted proof. Confirmation that we're alive, where we are." He rubbed a thumb over the edge of the torn photograph, careful not to cut himself. "Next time they'll come for the rest of it." Luca padded in, still half asleep, and climbed into his father's arms. Adrian held him close, eyes closing for a single, stolen second. When he looked up again, the mask was back in place. "We start moving again," he said. "Different protocols, new patterns. They found us once, they'll try again." Emma met his gaze. "And if they do, then we stop running." The words were quiet but final. "They want a war. Let them see what one looks like." He set Luca down and looked out across the mist-shrouded lake, where dawn was smudging gold into the water. The reflection caught in the shards of glass on the floor, tiny sparks of light scattered like promises too fragile to hold. The dining room no longer looked like a home. Maps covered the table, corners pinned down with coffee mugs and shell casings. Laptop screens glowed in the half-light, streams of code rolling across them like rain. Adrian stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, a dark bruise blooming at his collarbone. The men around him waited for orders. His voice, when it came, was steady as clockwork. "Every feed, every channel," he said. "If someone breathes near this property, I want to know which lung they used." Marco keyed a radio. Perimeter patrols doubled. Drones up within 10. Emma hovered near the doorway, barefoot, coffee cooling in her hand. The transformation unsettled her. The same man who had tucked his son into bed now moved pieces on a digital chessboard where lives were the pawns. He looked up suddenly, catching her watching. "You should eat," he said. "I'm fine. You're shaking." "I'm cold." It was only half true. He came over, setting a folded map on the counter between them. "They're clever, but not clever enough. The data pulse from last night originated 70 miles south. Abandoned industrial district. We'll move before dusk. You mean you'll move? He hesitated. Someone has to protect him here. I can do both, she said softly. You forget I used to live where people vanished before breakfast. I can read danger as well as you. A faint smile touched his mouth, gone as soon as it appeared. Then you'll monitor comms from the control room. If we go silent more than 5 minutes, call the fail-safe number in this file. He slid an envelope across the counter. Inside, a phone and a single piece of paper with a string of numbers written by hand. Emma traced the digits, realizing what trust cost a man like him. You think you'll find whoever did this tonight? He looked past her toward the window, where fog was crawling off the lake like smoke from a slow fire. No, he said, but I'll make them start running. The lake house control room buzzed with quiet focus. Screens glowed against the dim walls, their light tracing the fatigue on every face. Adrian stood behind the largest monitor, fingers tapping in a pattern of contained impatience. Lines of code scrolled until one square blinked red. There, Marco said. Ping originated from a warehouse off Route 17, abandoned 10 years ago. Adrian leaned closer. Who used it recently? Signal bounced through 3 dead servers, but the signature matches a phone once registered to Silvio Rossi. Emma heard the name for the first time. Silvio? Adrian's jaw tightened. He guarded my wife. After she died, he disappeared with half my security codes. He stared at the map long enough for the silence to grow heavy. He sold us out. I just never had proof. Marco exhaled. Could be a trap. Good, Adrian said. Traps have bait, and bait can be followed. The room fell back into motion. Weapons checked, coordinates entered, orders issued. Emma stood at the edge of it all, watching the machine of command reassemble itself around him. Precise, dangerous, unstoppable. When he finally looked her way, his expression had hardened into purpose. By tonight, this ends? He said. One way or another. By late afternoon the lake house hummed with readiness. The SUVs waited in the drive, the air smelled of fuel and rain. Adrian found Emma in the hall, Luca beside her with a puzzle spread across the floor. We're leaving in 10 minutes, he said. She stood. Then teach me how to use the comms. He frowned. You stay here. I'm not hiding again, she answered quietly. If something happens, you'll need someone who can think, not just follow orders. For a moment his control slipped, the smallest crack of conflict between fear and respect. Then he handed her a small earpiece. Channel 7. Keep it on. If we lose contact for more than 5 minutes, call the failsafe. She nodded, slipping it into her ear. You're trusting me a lot lately. I'm running out of people to trust. Luca looked up, sensing the tension. You'll come back, he signed. Adrian crouched, his large hands framing the boy's face. Semper, he said. Always. He pressed a kiss to Luca's forehead and stood. When the engine started outside, Emma walked him to the door. Rain was falling in fine threads now, blurring the trees into gray. Be careful, she said. He gave a brief nod. If you hear silence, don't wait for hope. Move. Then he was gone, swallowed by the sound of rain and engines. The door shut, leaving only the faint hum of electronics and the steady, watchful beat of her own heart. Evening deepened around the lake house, thunder murmuring far off across the water. Emma sat in the control room, the only light coming from the glow of screens. Lines of code flickered across one monitor. Heartbeat of the system Adrian had built. She tracked the SUV's GPS signals crawling along back roads toward the industrial district. Every few minutes Adrian's calm voice reached her through the earpiece. South approach clear. No heat signatures yet. Then, for a moment, silence. Static hissed, followed by a faint digital pulse on a separate screen. Not the convoy's frequency. She leaned closer. A short encrypted message was tunneling through the house server, originating from an unknown device inside the property. The translation software broke it open one word at a time. The boy is leverage. Move soon. Her stomach turned cold. The timestamp read 1 minute ago. Someone had sent it while she was watching the feed. She glanced at the hallway cameras. Empty. Yet a chair in the corner of the control room shifted slightly in the reflection of the screen, as if it had been brushed a heartbeat earlier. She forced herself to breathe, copied the message onto a drive, and locked it in a drawer. Adrian, she whispered into the mic. We've got a leak inside the network. Someone's? His voice cut through the static. Say again. Before she could answer, lightning flashed outside, the power blipped, and every monitor went dark. Rain fell in vertical lines through the cone of Adrian's headlights. The warehouse loomed ahead, corrugated metal, roof sagging, one door hanging crooked on its hinges. Too quiet, Marco muttered. The rest of the men fanned out, rifles low. Adrian stepped inside first. The air smelled of oil and rust. Water dripped steadily from somewhere above, each drop echoing like a countdown. Clear the corners, he ordered. Flashlights swept over stacks of crates and a rusted forklift. No bodies, no equipment, nothing, until his beam caught something white pinned to a crate in the center of the floor. A photograph. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and tore it free. Luca asleep at the lake house window, the date stamped yesterday. A red dot blinked on the photograph's corner. Down, he shouted. The explosion tore through the far wall. Metal screamed, fire bloomed in sheets of orange. Adrian hit the ground hard, covering his head as shrapnel hissed past. Gunfire followed, sharp and methodical, from the catwalks above. Ambush? Marco's voice roared through the smoke. We've got snipers. Adrian crawled to cover, returning fire toward the flashes. 2 of his men were already down. He grabbed the radio. Emma, fallback point Delta. Now? No response. Only static and the hiss of rain on flame. He clenched his jaw. They want me alive, he muttered. Mistake. He threw a smoke grenade toward the doorway, grabbed the wounded by their vests, and dragged them out into the storm, the warehouse collapsing behind them in a roar of metal and light. The control room screens flickered back to life one by one. Emma's reflection appeared ghost pale in the glass, rain streaked the windows behind her. The GPS tracker on the convoy map had stopped moving. Adrian, she said into the mic. Static. Marco, do you copy? Nothing. She forced herself to breathe, switching through backup channels until a burst of noise answered. Adrian's voice, rough, breathless, alive, were clear. Minor injuries. En route. Relief hit so hard her knees went weak. I thought you, he cut in. Keep the house locked. No one in or out. The line died again. She turned to the hallway camera feed. Every door was sealed, lights blinking green. Still, the silence felt predatory. She replayed the intercepted message. The boy is leverage. The words looked harmless on screen but carried the chill of intent. A muffled sound made her turn. Luca stood in the doorway, clutching his stuffed bear. Is Papa coming home? He asked. She knelt, gathering him close. Yes, sweetheart. He's already on his way. He nodded against her shoulder, trusting her lie as children do. When she looked back at the monitors, the storm outside was fading. But on one camera, far at the edge of the woods, a faint heat signature glowed and then vanished, as if the forest had blinked. It was almost dawn when engines rumbled up the drive again. Headlights swept across the wet gravel, catching the curve of Adrian's jaw as he stepped out. His coat was torn, soot streaking the side of his face. 2 of his men climbed from the other vehicle, one limping, one unconscious but breathing. Emma met them at the door. You're hurt. Not enough to matter. He brushed past her, setting his pistol on the table and spreading a handful of charred papers beside it. They knew we were coming. Someone fed them our rote. She hesitated, then pulled the flash drive from her pocket. And someone here sent this message while you were gone. He scanned the words on the screen, jaw tightening. Inside the network, inside the house, she corrected. Adrian nodded once. The calm in his voice was more frightening than rage. Then the hunt changes. He lifted the photograph recovered from the warehouse. Luca's sleeping face framed in the sniper's crosshairs, and set it beside her keyboard. They want me to break, he said quietly. Instead, we hunt. The Emma's gaze met his. The exhaustion, the fear, the anger, all of it fused into resolve. Then we hunt together. Outside, the first light touched the lake, cold and metallic. Inside, the house seemed to inhale before the next storm. The morning after the ambush smelled of disinfectant and gun oil. The kitchen table, once a place for coffee and laughter, had become a command station again. Maps, half-empty mugs, and a blood-stained bandage rolled beside the salt shaker. Outside, the lake glimmered with deceptive peace. Inside, every voice was a little too low, every glance a little too quick. Emma watched Adrian move among his men. The softness she'd glimpsed when he held his son was gone, replaced by the precision of a man who trusted no one completely. Not even himself. No phones leave this property, he ordered. No messages without encryption. Every piece of equipment gets scanned. Marco frowned. You think one of us? I think someone inside this house knows how to speak to our enemies, Adrian interrupted. Until I know who, Everyone's a suspect. The words landed like stones. The men dispersed to their stations, but their shoulders carried the weight of accusation. When the room emptied, Emma stepped forward. Suspicion can eat a team alive faster than bullets. Adrian met her gaze. Bullets are honest. Betrayal isn't. He handed her a tablet showing columns of server activity. You're good with patterns. Help me find the noise that doesn't belong. She scrolled through timestamps, each representing a heartbeat of the house's digital pulse. At first it was all routine. Patrol uploads, sensor checks, until she noticed a cluster of data packets repeating at perfect 10-minute intervals even during the blackout. Here, she said, highlighting the anomaly. Adrian leaned closer. Device ID. She pointed to the code string. Registered to Pietro. He straightened slowly, face unreadable. He was stationed at the generator last night. You think he? I think we'll ask him. He turned to the door, already shifting from strategist to predator. The light from the monitor carved sharp lines across his face, and for a moment she saw what the underworld must have seen for years: not the heir, not the father, but the hunter. When the door closed behind him, the silence that remained wasn't relief. It was the stillness before something breaks. By mid-morning the house felt like a machine breathing under strain. Adrian had moved every computer to the dining table. Cables snaked across the floor like veins. Marco's men worked in tense silence, each aware that a single mistyped password could brand him guilty. Emma sat beside Adrian, scrolling through streams of encrypted traffic. Every few minutes she caught his reflection in the monitor. Stone-faced, patient, dangerous. You built all this? She asked. After the first attempt on my father, he said. Information is armor, but armor cracks. She stopped at a line of repeating numbers. There. Ping every 10 minutes, always from the same node. Adrian leaned in. Rotor B4, that's Pietro's post. Marco, standing near the window, stiffened. Pietro's been with us 6 years. He wouldn't. He would if someone promised his mother's safety. Adrian cut in. Check his handset. A2 guards moved. Within seconds Pietro's phone lay on the table. Screen locked. Adrian entered an override code. A map appeared, a single dot pulsing 30 miles away. Too far for a man supposedly guarding the generator last night. Emma felt the room's temperature drop. Clone device? She asked. Or an accomplice? Adrian said. Either way we pull the string. He ordered all personal gear confiscated. The men exchanged wary glances. The air smelled of sweat and mistrust. When the search team dragged Pietro inside, mud still on his boots, Adrian's voice didn't rise. But the room seemed to shrink around him. Sit, he said. Let's see how deep this hole goes. They used the storage room. Bare walls, a single bulb swinging overhead. Pietro sat handcuffed to a chair, eyes darting from Adrian to Marco. Boss? I swear on my family. Exactly, Adrian said softly. Your family. That's the part that worries me. He laid the phone on the table between them. Explain why this device logged in from the city while you stood here last night. Pietro's throat worked. I don't know. Maybe cloned. Like she said. Who has your encryption key? No one. Wrong. Adrian's fist hit the table, a sharp crack that made the bulb tremble. Somebody had it. Someone close enough to mirror your credentials. From the control room feed, Emma watched the interrogation on her monitor. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, scrolling logs in parallel. Then she saw it. Another connection pinging live from a separate terminal upstairs, identical signature to Pietro's, operating even while he sat there swearing innocence. Her pulse kicked. She grabbed the radio. Adrian, stop. It's not him. The signal's still active. It's coming from inside the house. Adrian's head turned sharply toward the camera, eyes catching the lens like twin sparks. Then find whoever's holding the mirror, he said. The calm in his voice was colder than any threat. Emma ran from the control room, headset still clamped to one ear, heartbeat loud enough to drown the static. The corridor lights flickered as she passed. Somewhere below, Adrian's voice thundered orders, boots striking the floor in synchronized rhythm. She reached the nursery. Luca was sitting cross-legged on the rug, humming to himself while building a fortress of wooden blocks. His stuffed bear lay beside him, half unzipped at the seam of its neck. Sweetheart, she said, forcing calm, did someone come in here? He looked up, puzzled. Marco was here. He fixed my bear. Her stomach tightened. Marco hadn't left Adrian's side all morning. When? Before breakfast. She crossed to the bear, fingers tracing the neat, fresh stitches. The thread was darker than the original. Inside, something small and hard shifted, a data chip. Footsteps thundered in the hall, Pietro being dragged past, still shouting his innocence. Emma slipped the chip into her pocket just as Adrian appeared at the door. "Report," he said. "Not now," she whispered. "They planted something. I'll explain after you clear the house." He studied her face, understood, and nodded once. "Shell this room. Stay with him." She obeyed, though her mind raced. Whoever had planted the chip had access to Luca's room. Whoever it was had walked freely through the house while everyone searched Pietro. And the signal was still active by dusk. Suspicion had turned into strategy. Adrian gathered the men in the lower hall, his expression unreadable. "We have a breach," he said. "But tonight we flush it." He cut power to the main grid. Emergency lights bathed the house in a ghostly red. The plan was simple: simulate chaos, watch who moved where they shouldn't. From the control room, Emma watched the thermal feed. Every body glowed white, gold on the monitor. She saw Marco pacing the corridor, guards at their posts, and then another figure, Nico, slipping from the east wing toward the communications hub. Her breath caught. Nico, loyal since Adrian's father's era, moving like someone who knew exactly when to run. She grabbed the intercom. "Adrian, East Wing, server room." He was already moving. The cameras caught the collision: Nico reaching for a hidden drive under the console, Adrian's hand closing over his wrist. The look between them was part grief, part recognition. "Why?" Adrian asked. "They have my wife." Nico gasped. "They said if I didn't." Adrian's voice stayed low. "You should have come to me." Nico's eyes shone with regret. "I didn't trust Mercy." For a long moment neither moved. Then Adrian eased the drive from his hand. "You're done here?" he said quietly. "Marco, escort him out. No harm." The tension in his shoulders didn't release until the door shut behind them. When he looked toward the nearest camera, his eyes found Emma's through the feed. "It's over," he said. But they both knew it wasn't. Rain began again just before midnight. The sound against the glass was soft, almost gentle, a rhythm that didn't match the tension humming through the house. Nico was gone, escorted to one of Adrian's safe depots under armed watch. No one spoke during his removal. The silence afterward felt heavier than shouting would have. In the kitchen, Adrian stood at the sink, washing blood from his knuckles that wasn't his own. Emma leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching the water turn pink, then clear. "You didn't kill him," she said quietly. "I don't murder frightened men," he replied. "It doesn't make the rest of them less dangerous. You gave him a chance." "I gave him time to regret." He turned off the tap, drying his hands with deliberate calm. "Regret's a better weapon than fear." Outside, thunder rolled far across the lake. The guards changed posts, the house's electronic hum returned. Emma took the small data chip from her pocket and placed it on the table. This was in Luca's bear. Adrian stared at it. "When?" "This morning. Whoever planted it wanted us looking at Pietro while they hid this." He nodded slowly. "Then the real game hasn't even started." For a moment their eyes held. The rain on the windows blurred the line between reflection and reality, and she realized they were both haunted by the same thing now. Not what had happened, but what still might. The storm eased near dawn. The lake shimmered pewter gray, ripples catching the first pale light. Upstairs, Luca slept curled beneath his blankets, unaware of the invisible war that had crept into his home. Emma sat alone in the study, the data chip gleaming beside her laptop. She had scanned its contents twice. Fragments of encrypted coordinates, brief audio clips, a woman's voice saying a single phrase in Italian. "We are already inside." She shut the laptop and locked the chip in the desk drawer. When she looked up, Adrian was in the doorway, sleeves rolled, exhaustion lining his face. "Anything useful?" he asked. "Enough to know they're still watching?" she said. He crossed the room, resting a hand on the window frame. "Then we build thicker walls." She shook her head. "Walls won't stop whispers." He considered that, a slow breath fogging the glass. "Then we learn to whisper louder." Emma smiled faintly, though the fear beneath it never eased. When he left, she opened the drawer again and stared at the chip one last time. Inside its silent circuitry pulsed a message they hadn't yet decoded. The storm outside might have passed, but the war had simply changed language. The enemy was learning to whisper through their walls. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that made her skin prickle. Emma sat at the desk with the data chip slotted into Adrian's encrypted laptop. Lines of code filled the screen, white text crawling over black like snow. Somewhere in the mess hid the clue that had cost Nico his loyalty, and maybe his soul. She ran a decryption loop and leaned back, rubbing her temples. The speakers crackled. Not words, just a faint hiss, then the slow rhythm of wind across a microphone, followed by 3 distinct sounds: a soft chime, a dripping echo, and something like footsteps retreating. She played it again: chime, drip, step, silence. Adrian entered quietly behind her, a shadow reflected in the screen's glow. "What did you find?" "Listen." She hit replay. The sound filled the small room, thin and hollow, like something recorded underwater. When it ended, he didn't speak for several seconds. His eyes had gone distant. "That bell," he said finally. "It's ours?" She frowned. "Ours. The dock bell. I hung it when Luca was little, so he'd ring it if he fell in." His hand closed into a fist. "This was recorded here." Emma's stomach turned. "Then whoever's been sending these messages isn't miles away. They're close enough to hear the lake." He nodded once, anger sharpening the lines of his face. "They've been inside our fence. Maybe closer." They listened again, counting the seconds between chimes. The rhythm matched the wind that morning, the way it hit the lake from the east. She turned in the chair. "Adrian, this isn't just a recording. It's live. Someone left a transmitter running." He reached for his radio. Already barking orders: "Marco, sweep the perimeter. Dock first. If you see that bell move, shoot the air above it." When he turned back, the mask of control had slipped just enough for her to see what lived underneath. Rage? Yes, but fear too. Not for himself. For the first time, she understood the lake house wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a microphone. By mid-morning, cables trailed through every room again. Marco's team swept the walls with portable scanners, their soft beeps punctuating the silence. Each pass came back clean. "No transmitters," one guard said. "Not even a loose wire." Adrian's jaw tightened. Then how did they get the sound of the dock? Emma leaned over a laptop showing a real-time graph of signal traffic. Spikes bloomed and faded like heartbeats. "Look," she said. "Every time a device connects to Wi-Fi, the frequency pattern repeats, the same one embedded in the chip." She tapped the list of connected units. There weren't many: 3 security tablets, 1 control server, and Luca's tablet. "Disconnect it," Adrian ordered. The moment she did, the signal flat-lined. The room went silent except for the rain. "So they piggybacked his device," she murmured. "A ghost process hidden inside the operating system." Adrian stared at the tablet on the counter, at the childish sticker of a cartoon swan on its case. "They used my son's games to talk to us." Emma touched his arm. "What can trace it?" "Every ghost leaves a shadow." He nodded once, the movement sharp. "Do it. I want to know who's listening before they hear us planning their funeral." Hours later, the storm had burned itself out. Pale light slid through the blinds, striping the office in gold and gray. Emma worked at the terminal, isolating lines of code from the infected tablet. Adrian stood behind her, arms crossed. "Here," she said finally. "See that signature? The encryption string starts with MK. It's not random." He froze. "Those are my wife's initials." Emma looked up. "She wrote this code. She designed our family security years ago, said it was unbreakable. When she died, I buried every copy." His voice faltered, rare and rough. "They found it, twisted it, made it whisper back at me." She hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe they didn't find it. Maybe someone who loved her kept a piece of it alive." The idea hit him like a blade turned sideways. He rubbed a hand over his face. Silvio worked with her on the original build. He would have known her failsafes, her phrases, even her voice patterns. The screen emitted another faint hiss, an echo of the same 3 sounds: chime, drip, step, but underneath it this time was something else, a voice almost too low to catch. Emma increased the gain. A whisper formed through the static. "You can't guard what you love forever." Adrian's breath caught. For the first time since she'd met him, his control cracked completely. He turned away from the screen, voice raw. "They're not just watching. They're mocking her memory." Emma closed the laptop gently. "Then let's answer them in her language. Let's make their code betray them." Outside, the wind lifted the dock bell again, and its single chime sounded more like a challenge than a warning. Night fell fast, the lake turning from pewter to black glass. In the office, every screen glowed blue against Adrian's tired face. Emma sat beside him, fingers flying over the keyboard as she reconstructed the virus inside a sealed sandbox network. Lines of alien code crawled upward. Hidden inside was a looping command, an address buried beneath false routes. Emma stripped away each layer until only one set of coordinates remained. 2 miles north, she said. Abandoned ranger station, other side of the lake. Adrian studied the map. They're that close. Close enough to watch the windows. He rubbed a thumb along his jaw. They've been patient. That's what scares me. She zoomed in, revealing power, grid data. Still connected to an auxiliary line, they're drawing current. Someone's living there. He straightened, the tension in his shoulders shifting from exhaustion to purpose. We go tonight? Emma shook her head. Not yet. If we rush, we lose our advantage. Let me finish tracing the outbound packets first. We might learn who's upstream. Adrian hesitated, then gave a single nod. 1 hour. Then I move. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills, low and distant, as if the storm itself were listening. An hour later, the map still glowed between them, the tiny red dot pulsing like a heartbeat across the lake. Luca slept upstairs, the soft chime of the dock bell drifting through the open window. Adrian stood at the glass, watching the reflection of lightning far away. I could end it now, he said. 1 phone call, 1 team. Emma shook her head. You'd destroy the evidence. They'd vanish, and we'd never know who's holding the strings. He turned toward her. And if waiting costs us him? She didn't flinch. Then we build a trap instead of a grave. Silence settled between them, filled only by the rhythmic patter of rain returning. Finally, he exhaled. All right, we wait. We listen. She nodded, relieved. Good. Because their arrogance will make them talk again. Adrian picked up the bell from the window ledge and weighed it in his hand. Then let's make sure they hear something worth listening to. He hung the bell back on its hook. Outside, wind swept across the lake, setting it ringing. A clear, defiant sound cutting through the dark. They stood together at the window until the echoes faded, knowing the next move would come from across that water. And when it did, they would be ready. The lake lay under a sheet of early mist, smooth and gray as poured metal. Adrian stood on the dock checking the rifle's sights, movements economical, almost ritualistic. Marco's men loaded gear into waterproof cases behind him. EMP rig, radios, thermal scopes. Emma tightened the strap on her vest. You really think they'll still be there? They've kept the transmitter live, he said. That means they feel safe. Or they're waiting for us. He allowed a flicker of a smile. Then we give them what they want. From the shore, Luca watched through the kitchen window, small hands pressed to the glass. Emma waved once, a silent promise. She tried to ignore how easily he trusted her promises now. The plan was clean approach under fog cover, jam the signal, extract any data before destroying the station. But plans, she'd learned, rarely survived contact with fear. Marco handed her a headset. Channel 6. Stay close to him. I usually do. Adrian's glance met hers, half warning, half something softer, and then he looked away, scanning the water. We'll launch in 10. While the team made final checks, she stepped to the edge of the dock. The bell above her head chimed once, a thin, clear sound that rolled out over the fog. Somewhere out there, she thought. Someone might be listening again. When she turned back, Adrian was watching her. Ready? Always, she said, though her heartbeat disagreed. They climbed into the narrow motorboat, engines whispering to life. The house receded into mist, swallowed by silence. Ahead the far shore waited, dark trees, a hint of metal roof glinting faintly through the fog. Adrian's voice came over the radio, low and sure. When we land, stay behind me. No heroics. Emma smiled without humor. You forget, I'm the one who finds ghosts in code. He didn't answer, eyes fixed on the fog ahead. The boat cut a thin path through the water, each ripple vanishing almost as soon as it formed. By the time the opposite shore appeared, the sun had begun to burn through the mist, turning everything gold and sharp. The ranger station rose out of the trees like a scar. The motorboat slid through fog so thick it swallowed sound. The only noise was the low hum of the engine and the rhythmic knock of water against the hull. Emma sat near the bow, her hand gripping the rail, eyes straining for the outline of the far shore. Adrian steered with one hand, the other resting on the pistol at his hip. Even through the mist she could see the exhaustion etched into his face. He hadn't slept since the night before, maybe longer. How close are we? She whispered. 1/2 mile. The fog curled around them like smoke. Somewhere out in the white, a loon called, a long, mournful note that carried across the water. "Sounds like a warning?" she murmured. "Or an echo." She looked over her shoulder. The lake house had vanished behind the veil of mist, reduced to memory. Out here there was only water and silence, and Adrian's presence beside her, heavy with intent. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low. "If anything happens, you get back to the boat. No arguments." "Wouldn't dream of it," she said, though both of them knew she would never leave him behind. A faint outline emerged ahead, trees, then a slanted roof half hidden in fog. The ranger station. Adrian throttled down the engine, guiding the boat toward a small wooden pier that jutted from the shore like a finger pointing into nowhere. He cut the power, and the world went still. "From here, quiet," he said. They stepped out together, boots sinking into damp earth. The air smelled of rain and rust. Somewhere inside the trees, metal creaked, an old door shifting in the wind. Emma adjusted the strap of her pack. "Ready." Adrian glanced at her, then at the horizon beginning to pale with dawn. "Let's see who's been listening." The ranger station loomed up from the fog, a squat, two-story structure of rotting timber and corrugated metal. The door hung crooked, one hinge broken, groaning faintly as it moved. Inside smelled of oil, mold, and smoke. Dust motes drifted through the light from their flashlights. A table stood overturned, a mug shattered on the floor beside a pile of cigarette butts. "Someone's been here," Emma whispered. Adrian's flashlight swept across the room, pausing on a corner where a thin cable disappeared into the floorboards. He crouched, pulling it free. Power line. Live. They followed it to a narrow stairwell leading down to the basement. Each step creaked. The air grew colder, heavier. In the shadows below, a low mechanical whine pulsed. At the bottom, a transmitter sat on a metal table, lights flickering green. Next to it, headphones, a recorder, and a stack of old drives labeled with dates. Emma pressed a key on the console. A child's voice filled the air. "Papa, look!" "The swans, Luca." Adrian froze. "How?" "It's his tablet's mic feed," she said, horror rising in her chest. "They've been recording him for days." He turned sharply, scanning the shadows. "They knew we'd come. This is bait." The floor above creaked once. "Too heavy for wind." Adrian's hand went to his weapon. "Down," he whispered. "They're here." The warning came as the faintest click. Metal against metal. Adrian pulled Emma down just as the first bullet chewed through the wall where her head had been. The shot's echo filled the basement, dust raining from the ceiling. "Back corner," he barked, dragging her behind the overturned table. Plaster shattered overhead, daylight knifed through the new holes. She forced her breath steady, hands trembling as she checked the transmitter's power cable. "They're trying to destroy the evidence." "Not yet." Adrian peeked around the edge, firing a short burst toward the flash of muzzle flame outside. Two more shots answered, closer now. Emma caught the glint of movement through a broken window, shapes weaving between trees. "There's more than one." "Three," he corrected. "Maybe four." "Stay down." Over the radio, Marco's voice cracked through static. "We're 2 minutes out." "Hold position." Adrian gritted his teeth. "We won't last 2 minutes." He grabbed a smoke grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and lobbed it toward the doorway. The room flooded with gray haze, swallowing the flicker of muzzle flashes. "Move." They sprinted toward the back exit, crouching low. The fog outside turned the forest into a maze of silhouettes. Emma's lungs burned, every branch sounded like a gunshot. Behind them the transmitter whined louder, lights cycling red. Adrian turned, firing again, controlled, exact. One figure dropped. Another cursed in Italian, retreating toward the trees. Then Marco's men burst through the smoke, answering fire with fire. The air exploded into chaos, shouts, flashes, the metallic scream of ricochets. Within seconds it was over. Silence rushed in like a tide withdrawing. Adrian lowered his weapon slowly. "Clear?" "Clear," Marco confirmed. "We've got one alive." Scene 5. The capture. The surviving attacker was young. Barely 20. His face streaked with mud and fear. They found him half buried behind a log, clutching a cheap pistol. Marco hauled him forward, forcing him to his knees before Adrian. "Who sent you?" Adrian asked. The boy swallowed. "I'm just a courier." "For who?" "Silvio," he whispered, "but he doesn't lead anymore. He takes orders now." Adrian crouched, voice low. "From whom?" The courier's eyes darted toward the trees, panic flashing. "You don't understand. There." A crack split the air. His body jerked once and went still, a hole blooming red between his eyes. The echo rolled across the lake. "Sniper?" Marco shouted, diving for cover. Adrian yanked Emma down beside him, scanning the ridge with his scope. Nothing. Just fog swallowing everything beyond 50 yards. When the silence returned, it was deeper than before. The courier's lifeless hand still clutched a small data stick. Adrian pried it free, jaw tight. "They killed him to keep him quiet," Emma said softly. He nodded. Which means he was about to tell the truth. They stared toward the tree line, where smoke from the earlier gunfire drifted upward like a signal. Somewhere out there, the real enemy was already moving the next piece. By the time the gunfire faded, the sky had begun to pale. Mist still hung over the lake, tinted pink by the rising sun. The smell of gunpowder and damp pine clung to the air. Marco's men swept the perimeter, collecting shell casings and bodies in grim silence. Emma stood near the ruined doorway, watching Adrian kneel beside the transmitter. Its lights blinked weakly, the final pulse of a dying heart. "Can we still pull anything from it?" she asked. He connected the small drive they'd taken from the courier. The screen flared to life. Coordinates, dozens of them, scattered across a digital map. "Dead drops," he said. "Every one of these is a safe site in the city, so the network was never just here." "No," he murmured, eyes narrowing. "The lake was the distraction. The real operations are still running back home." A wind pushed through the shattered windows, stirring the papers on the table. Among them lay a photograph of the lake house taken from above, printed on glossy paper. In the corner someone had written a single word in red ink: "Next." Emma's breath caught. "They plan to come back." Adrian pocketed the photo. "Then we'll go to them first." Marco approached. "What about the station?" "Burn it," Adrian said. "Every wire, every memory." The men moved quickly, dousing the walls with fuel. Flames climbed, orange against the gray dawn. The heat pressed at Emma's face as she and Adrian stepped back toward the boat. The fire's reflection wavered on the lake's surface, bright and brief. "Do you ever get used to this?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "If I did, I'd be worse than them." They climbed into the boat. As the engine turned over, she looked back one last time. The ranger station was already collapsing inward, smoke twisting upward like a column of ghosts. "The lake was never the cage," she said softly. "It was the mirror." Adrian's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then let's see what's staring back." The motor roared to life, and they cut through the fading mist toward the horizon. The city waiting beyond the water, its skyline invisible but inevitable. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world rinsed and fragile. Steam rose from the wet boards of the dock as Adrian tightened the straps on the last crate. Behind him, the lake house stood hollow, windows boarded, security lights disabled, the quiet too complete to feel natural. The bell above the porch moved once in the wind, a single muted ring that sounded like farewell. Luca sat on a suitcase, clutching his bear. "Will we come back?" he signed. Adrian hesitated. "Of course," he said aloud, though his eyes stayed on the gray horizon. Emma watched the exchange from the steps, raincoat hood drawn up. She could tell by the weight in his voice that he didn't believe it. The lake had been refuge and cage both, and he was already halfway gone in his mind. Back to the city, back to the fight. "Engines ready," Marco called. They loaded into the SUVs. Tires crunched on gravel as the convoy wound down the narrow road. Through the rear window Emma saw the lake disappear between the trees until only mist remained. It felt like closing a door on something that had almost been peace. Hours later, the skyline rose out of the haze, steel spires and restless lights, a pulse too fast to match human hearts. Adrian's posture changed as the city swallowed them. The guarded father vanished, replaced by the calculating hair she'd first met. Luca pressed his face to the glass, watching the blur of graffiti, stained walls and flashing billboards. "Loud," he murmured, voice barely audible. Emma smiled faintly. "It always is." When they reached the underground garage beneath Adrian's headquarters, men with earpieces waited. Their nods were crisp, respectful, but their eyes flicked toward Emma with curiosity. The outsider, the woman who'd survived the lake. Adrian stepped from the car without hesitation, his reflection rising tall in the glass doors. "Back to work," he said, and the words sounded like both command and warning. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and money. Screens glowed along the walls, feeds of traffic, markets, people who didn't know they were pieces in a war. The hum of machines replaced the wind of the lake. Emma felt the ground vibrate beneath her feet and realized that peace had always been temporary. Here even silence had teeth. The elevator doors opened on the top floor of the high-rise, revealing a space that looked more like a command center than an office. Glass walls framed the skyline. Every surface reflected light from the hundreds of screens, showing live feeds of streets, warehouses, and ports. Adrian stepped out first. The hum of servers filled the air, a mechanical heartbeat he'd once found comforting. Now it sounded like confinement. Marco briefed the security team while Emma wandered to the window. Below, the city stretched in layers, traffic veins glowing red, skyscrapers blinking like restless eyes. Somewhere down there, the network of traders pulsed unseen, feeding on his legacy. "This was your world," she said quietly. "It still is," Adrian answered, removing his jacket. "You can't leave a kingdom built in blood. You can only decide whether to rule it or burn it." He walked to a console and entered a password. A holographic map flared to life between them, showing dozens of red points scattered across the city. "Coordinates from the ranger station," Emma guessed. He nodded. "Dead drops, safe houses, old businesses. They thought I'd forgotten." "You haven't," she said. "No," he replied, eyes hard. "I've just been remembering in silence." The lights dimmed automatically as the system sensed. Emma noticed his reflection in the glass. Half shadow, half man, perfectly at home and completely alone. "You built this to control chaos," she said. "But chaos learned your language." He glanced at her. "Then we teach it ours." Hours later, the map pulsed with digital life. Emma sat cross-legged on the conference table, laptop open, her fingers flying as she synchronized the GPS data. Adrian paced behind her, coffee untouched. "These aren't random," she said. "Each coordinate activates at specific times, like a signal schedule. It's a message hidden in the timing itself." Marco leaned over her shoulder. "Can you read it?" "Almost." She hit a key, and the map rearranged itself, points forming faint lines, then curves. The pattern sharpened circles orbiting a central hub. Adrian frowned. "That central point, what's there?" She zoomed in. The screen displayed a name, St. Agnes District, and beneath it, a small icon labeled Private Academy for the Diff. Emma's pulse spiked. "That's Luca's school." Adrian's composure broke for the first time since leaving the lake. "They're using the city's layout to lead me back to him." Marco swore softly. "You want me to pull him out?" "No," Adrian said after a beat. "That's what they expect. We keep him there, guarded but visible. If they want bait, we'll give them bait." Emma looked up sharply. "You're turning your son into a trap." "I'm turning their obsession into a mistake," he said. "They think they know my fear. Let's show them my strategy." He turned to her, eyes colder than the glass around them. "You'll stay with him. Decode the next pattern from inside the lion's den." The abandoned market lay beneath the city like a forgotten lung. Rows of rusted stalls, dust thick as velvet, air tasting of copper and mildew. Adrian moved first, gun drawn, his flashlight cutting narrow paths through the dark. Emma followed, every step echoing on cracked tile. "This was one of your warehouses?" she asked quietly. "Once. We ran food shipments through here before the wars. Then it went cold. Now it was anything but." Speakers hung from the rafters, jury rigged to car batteries. One crackled to life as they entered. "Papa, look, the swans." Luca's voice spilled through the darkness. Bright, innocent, looping. The same recording from the lake, warped into mockery. Adrian froze. The muscles in his jaw twitched. The flashlight trembling slightly before he steadied it. "Stay behind me," he muttered. They advanced down the aisle. Each speaker played another fragment, Luca laughing, humming, whispering. A child's voice woven into the ruins. At the market center, a mural covered the wall, a blood-red swan painted in broad, chaotic strokes. Beneath it, in black letters, Tish Belodia you spirit will chaos do tvc. Emma's stomach turned. "They're telling you mercy was a mistake." He stared at the message for a long time. "Maybe it was," he said, voice raw. From the far end of the hall came the faint sound of footsteps. Deliberate, unhurried. When the flashlight swung that way, the beam caught the outline of a man disappearing through an iron door. "Silvio." Adrian breathed and broke into a run. They burst through the door into a service tunnel lit by flickering bulbs. The echo of boots on concrete bounced around them. Adrian moved like a predator, gun steady, eyes locked on the blur of a coat ahead. "Silvio." His voice hit the walls like thunder. "Stop." The figure didn't slow. He turned a corner, and was gone. Only the smell of smoke lingered. Emma caught up, panting. He was alive. That was him. Adrian scanned the ground, finding fresh cigarette ash. He wanted me to see him. He's bait again. She frowned. Then who's holding the leash? He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his radio. Marco, pull surveillance from every camera near the market exits. I want faces, timestamps, everything. Minutes later, a guard's voice came through the static. Boss, we've got a hit. Sylvia left 5 minutes before you arrived. Emma froze. Then this entire scene was staged. Adrian's eyes narrowed as he turned back toward the murals still burning in his memory. They're playing on delay. Someone's scripting the story. On her laptop, Emma mapped the coordinates they'd already cracked. Lines connected into letters, curves forming a single word. She whispered it aloud. Adrian's face went still. They're not after the city, he said. They're after what's left of us. Night draped the city in neon and noise. From Adrian's office, the skyline looked alive. Windows pulsing, headlights threading through the streets like veins of molten light. The world outside had never looked so crowded or so cold. Emma stood by the window, the glow reflecting in her eyes. Behind her, Adrian studied the word on the screen again. The letters formed from coordinates, from pain, from design. Each one was a piece of a message meant only for him. They know where we are, she said quietly. They've always known, he replied. The difference is now they want us to know they know. That's not taunting, she said. That's strategy. He turned, face half lit by the city's harsh gold. They're shifting focus. The attacks, the recordings, they've stopped chasing power. They're chasing peace. She frowned. Peace. The one thing they think I'll protect no matter the cost. His gaze drifted toward the small screen showing Luca asleep in the next room, guard posted outside the door. They're not hunting my empire anymore. They're hunting him. Emma's throat tightened. Then you move him. Tonight? Adrian shook his head. No, we end this before it reaches him again. He closed the laptop with a decisive snap. Every drop point, every ghost signal, they all lead inward. The city isn't the battlefield. It's the trap. And we're already standing in the center. Emma crossed her arms, heart pounding. Then we spring it before they do. He looked up, meeting her eyes. The exhaustion there was tempered by something sharper, resolve. That's why I need you to stay with him. Whatever comes next if I fail. You won't? She cut in, voice firm. You don't get to fall now. He almost smiled. You're terrible at following orders. Only the bad ones, she said. Outside the power grid flickered, just a momentary pulse. Lights dimming across the skyline like a slow blink. In the brief darkness, their reflections merged in the glass, two figures bound by purpose and something dangerously close to faith. When the lights steadied again, Adrian spoke softly, almost to himself. Then it's war in my own house. The city stretched beneath them, humming like a loaded weapon. The morning began too still. No alarms, no reports, no hum of servers booting up to life. Only the soft crackle of rain on the windows, and the low murmur of city traffic below. Emma poured coffee into 2 cups, her reflection wavering in the dark surface. Across the room, Luca built a fortress of toy soldiers on the rug, arranging them with precise care, little warriors standing at attention. Adrian stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and controlled. No shipments move until I give word, he said. They're probing the perimeter, let them. I want to see who bites first. He ended the call and turned toward her. You should take him downstairs to the playroom. She smiled faintly. That's the same thing you said before the last storm. This time it's just weather, he said, but even as he spoke, his gaze flicked toward the security monitors in the corner. One feed glitched for a second, just long enough to notice. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Too soon, no one should have accessed this early. Adrian set down his cup. Marco. He called into the comm. Static. Marco. Report nothing. The next feed froze mid-frame, a guard blurred in motion, half turning toward the camera. The screen went black. Emma felt her chest tighten. Power surge. No, Adrian said. Infiltration. He moved fast, flipping the control panel open, overriding door locks. Get him to the panic room, Adrian. Now. She grabbed Luca's hand and ran. Behind her, she heard him issuing rapid fire orders to invisible men, the clipped rhythm of someone who had lived too many mornings like this one. When the lights flickered again, the rain outside turned white with lightning. and the skyline blinked as if the entire city had just drawn a breath and was waiting to exhale. Adrian's office transformed into a war room within seconds. The building's AI stuttered, screens flashing in rapid succession. Every security feed showed the same glitchy static, then the flicker of a silhouette too brief to identify. "Backup servers," he ordered. Marco's voice crackled over the intercom. "They're in the grid, boss. Elevators just locked on their own." Adrian's fingers flew across the control pad. "Manual override, code Delta 6. Access denied. Try again, access denied." He froze. The message font was wrong, slightly curved, almost elegant. Emma recognized it instantly. "That's the ghost code," she whispered. "The same one from the lake." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Then they've breached the mainframe. They're inside the building's nervous system." He flipped a hidden switch beneath the desk. Metal shutters slid over the glass walls with a grinding roar. The view of the city vanished, replaced by steel. Luca's voice came faintly from the hallway. "Mama." Emma sprinted toward him, pulling him close. "We're fine," she said, forcing calm. "Remember the drills." Adrian turned back to the monitor. One last feed still flickered. The lobby camera. Through the static he saw a group of men entering in formation, weapons ready. A logo marked their vests, a black swan painted over a red circle. "They're here," he said. The screen went dark. And then, somewhere far below, the first explosion shook the tower. The blast hit like thunder rolling up through concrete. The floor vibrated under their feet, ceiling tiles rattled loose and crashed to the floor. Lower levels breached. Marco's voice shouted over the radio. "They're sweeping up fast, east stairwell's gone." Adrian pulled open a weapons case hidden behind a cabinet. Inside lay 2 rifles, extra mags, and a compact EMP charge. He tossed one rifle to Marco. "Contain them on 25. No civilians get caught in this." Emma was already guiding Luca toward the panic room. The reinforced door recognized her palm print and hissed open, revealing a narrow space lined with screens and oxygen tanks. "Stay inside," she told him. "No noise. No lights until I come back." Luca's hands trembled as he signed. "You'll come back." She smiled. "Always." Then the door sealed, and the lock engaged with a heavy click. Adrian joined her in the hallway, rifle ready. The emergency lights flickered red, painting the walls like open wounds. "Comms are unstable," he said. "They're jamming frequencies, then we go analog." She tapped the side of her head, using their shared signs. 2 floors down, west corridor, bottleneck point. He nodded. "Move quiet. Cover right." They advanced together, each motion practiced, synchronized. Smoke rolled up from the stairwell ahead, gunfire echoed from below. Short, controlled bursts, then screams cut off too soon. When Adrian peeked down the stairwell, a drone camera stared back, red light blinking like an unblinking eye. He shot it once. It fell, sparking, but another immediately replaced it. "They've turned our systems against us," he said. "Every eye I built is theirs now." The building trembled again. Somewhere deep inside, the war he'd always tried to keep outside had finally come home. Smoke filled the upper corridors like a second storm. The building's defense turrets, the ones Adrian had commissioned to protect against outside attacks, swiveled and clicked, reprogrammed by the enemy's code. The machines didn't recognize friend from foe anymore. A burst of gunfire tore through the hallway, forcing Adrian and Emma to dive behind a marble pillar. Sparks rained down, lighting the air in stuttering orange flashes. "Can you cut the feed?" she shouted over the noise. "Not without access to the core," he answered. "They've locked me out of my own system. Then we do it old school." She grabbed a maintenance panel, ripped out the wires, and jammed 2 together. The nearest turret sparked, whined, and went dead. One down. Adrian stared at her for a second, half in disbelief, half in admiration. "Remind me to never underestimate you again." "You already did." They moved together through the haze, clearing corners, the rhythm of a silent dance they hadn't rehearsed, but somehow knew by heart. Every corridor felt alive, doors breathing, lights flickering like Morse code. The air tasted of ozone and iron. From the stairwell, Marco's voice cracked through static. "Boss, we're holding 25, but they've got tech support on their side. Drones, automated guns, full stack. Hold as long as you can." Adrian ordered. "We'll shut down the source. Copy. And boss." "What?" "They're not wearing masks. They want to be seen." Adrian exchanged a glance with Emma. "Then whoever sent them wants me to recognize the bodies." But above them, another explosion shook the ceiling. dust sifting down like ash. Somewhere, a drone whirred to life again, its red eye scanning the hallway. The siege wasn't just an attack. It was a message written in blood and circuitry. In the panic room, the lights flickered twice, then went dark. Luca clutched his bear tighter, the emergency lamp painting him in ghostly blue. Upstairs, Emma's tablet flashed an alert: panic room lock override authorization pending. Her stomach dropped. Adrian, the system's trying to unlock the door remotely. His expression hardened. They're after him. You'll have to override from the core. That's 4 floors down. I'll hold the upper levels. Alone. He loaded a fresh magazine. It's not the first time. She touched his arm once, a brief anchor, and then ran. The corridors tilted and roared as another detonation hit the lower levels. Smoke clawed at her lungs. Alarms howling like sirens from another world. She slid behind overturned furniture, ducked under sparking wires, and moved like a shadow through chaos. In the server room, the air was freezing. Towers of blinking lights stretched toward the ceiling, their reflections painting her face in green and white. She typed fast, hands trembling but precise. Override local access, isolate node. Manual confirmation required. Adrian's voice crackled faintly over the radio. Emma, report. I'm here, she said. Almost done. Stay low. Then the line went dead. She pressed enter. The screens flared white, then stabilized. The panic room relocked, safe, for now. But the system's timer started counting down from 60 seconds, and at the top of the code she saw a new command appear: extra teach bow. Her pulse spiked. The attack wasn't failing, it was evolving. The server room flickered like a storm of light. Emma's fingers moved in frantic rhythm, typing through the smoke. Every screen carried the same phrase. XDT boy, looping faster, rewriting itself into every subsystem. She forced the firewall open and dove into the command root. Come on, static answered. Then, faintly, Adrian's voice, Emma, status. I can flip it, she said. But I have to reverse the entire grid. It'll hit everything? Our drones, theirs, maybe the comms? Do it? Adrian? Do it now. She hit execute. All at once, the screens went dark, then blazed gold. The building shuddered as a ripple of energy raced downward, an invisible wave rolling through wires, circuits, and steel. The turrets in the halls whined, re-aimed, and began firing, but not at them. Screams echoed from the lower floors as the invaders found themselves caught in their own crossfire. Adrian staggered into the room, rifle smoke curling from his sleeve. You did it. Half of it. On the main monitor, a final transmission flashed before the code dissolved. We never wanted your throne, only your heir. The line faded, leaving only the reflection of fire in their eyes. By evening, the siege was over. Sirens wailed outside as emergency crews swarmed the ruined tower. The rain had returned, washing the suit from the windows in thin black rivers. Emma sat on the steps of the penthouse, suit on her hands, pulse finally slowing. Luca ran into her arms, silent tears smudging the dirt on his cheeks. She signed, safe, all safe. Adrian stood a few feet away, framed by the broken glass of the window. Beyond him, the city glittered, unaware, unbroken. Marco gave a final report and left him alone. He turned to her. They're gone. For now, she said. He nodded. They wanted a door and we gave them one, but it closes tonight. She studied him. The man who had been war and father, shadow and shield. And tomorrow, he said softly, we'll rebuild something worth guarding. Luca tugged his sleeve. Home. Adrian smiled faintly. Yes, wherever we go next, we make it ours. He looked once more at the skyline, lights flickering like distant stars, and then turned away from it, for the first time without fear. The three of them stepped into the elevator shaft that now led only down, the world above still burning, the one below waiting to be claimed. As the doors slid shut, the final reflection of the fire caught the word etched into the glass. And then the light went out. Spring came late that year. The mountains were still dusted white when the first swans returned to the lake. Their wings stirred the surface into slow ripples, glints of sun sliding off the water. A cabin sat where the old house had once stood, smaller, simpler, rebuilt with deliberate hands. No guards, no gates, no cameras. Only wind, wood, and the soft ring of a bell over the dock. Emma stood on the porch, mug of tea warming her palms. The air smelled of pine and smoke, the kind of clean that used to feel impossible. Behind her, laughter spilled from the open door. Luca's bright, unguarded laugh. He ran past her and down toward the water, his hair catching light like fire. Don't go too far, she called, signing the words as she spoke. He signed back without looking. I know, Mama. The name still startled her sometimes, but in a way that made her smile. He'd chosen it himself, quietly, one morning when she'd helped him learn a new word in sign belonging. Adrian appeared beside her, sleeves rolled, a streak of flour on his wrist. He's making friends with the swans again. They seem to like him, she said. They don't know he used to be guarded by half an army. He doesn't remember that part anymore, she said softly. Maybe that's for the best. He leaned on the railing, watching the boys skip stones. He remembers enough. He remembers she taught him to listen. Emma looked at him, unsure if he meant her or the wife he'd lost, maybe both. But the weight in his voice had changed. It wasn't guilt anymore, just something quieter. Gratitude, maybe. Survival. They stayed like that for a while, saying nothing, listening to the lake breathe. The world had gone smaller, but it finally fit. Later, when the sun dipped low, Luca came running back with a handful of feathers and a grin that belonged entirely to childhood. He signed, "They left one for us." Emma knelt, brushing his hair from his eyes. Maybe they knew we'd stay this time. Adrian watched them both, a slow smile touching the corners of his mouth. Dinner's ready. And if I burn it, we're blaming Marco? Marco isn't here, Emma said. Exactly. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight, soft, warm, real. No alarms, no metal hum. Just a fire, the smell of bread, the faint creak of old floorboards. Peace wasn't perfect, she'd learned. It was simply what you built between the scars. As night settled, she stepped outside again. The stars were bright above the lake, and the bell on the dock swayed gently in the wind. A memory flickered. Gunfire, smoke, the taste of fear, and then faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of waves against wood. Adrian joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Still listening? Always, she said. But it's quiet now. He nodded toward the horizon where dawn would come again tomorrow. Let's hope it stays that way. The wind answered with a soft chime. Emma reached for his hand. If it doesn't, she said, then we'll face it together. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw it in his eyes. The man he had been, the man he'd become, and the man he still wanted to be. All of them, finally at peace with one another. Down by the dock, Luca lifted the bell's rope, and let it ring once, clear and bright. The sound rolled out across the water, caught in the echo between mountains and sky, and then lingered. Like a promise that didn't need words. The lake shimmered, the world exhaled, and for the first time in too long, silence meant safety. The end.